Welcome to this tutorial on how to create this cool 3D fully dimensional animation 100% in After Effects, and actually just like that says, really quickly and easily, and that I hope it's going to be a lot of fun for everybody. So we're going to basically be using two main tools, and those are iExpressions and 3D Extruder. We're going to use some other tools as well, but those are the sort of the two big guys, if you will. So let me shrink this down a little bit. So here I am in CS 5.5. However, all these tools and this entire tutorial can be created in as far back a version as CS4. As a matter of fact, the downloadable version of the project was created, and this animation that you just saw was created in CS4 for maximum compatibility, if you're following along at home. So here we are, brand new project. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do this whole thing at 1280 by 720. You can do it, of course, at any size you want. And we'll just make it a 24p. And that should be good for now. The first thing we're going to do is, as a matter of fact, one of the other tools we're going to use is Chameleon, which is going to allow us to use a color palette from the Cooler website. So let me... So I'm going to put this in half res, and let's just get started with the text tool. So I'm just going to select the text tool, and I'm going to write 3D Extruder, and I'm going to go ahead and select the font size to be 150 points, and I'm going to choose Helvetica Bold here. You can of course choose whatever you want, however you want it. So alright, there it is. And like I said, what I'm going to do is choose the color palette to be from Cooler. So I'm going to go to the Cooler website here, which is cooler.adobe.com, and I found this nice little palette here. So you need to sign in. I'm going to sign in real quick. Once you're signed in, you are able to download the palette. So here's a little download icon. So I'm going to use this guy here. I'm just going to say download, and I'm going to download it into my little tutorial folder here. And once I have it downloaded, in After Effects, I'm going to run Chameleon. Chameleon is a script that lets you work. I'm just going to pull this out here. I'm just going to have it separated for now. So I'm going to go ahead and say load ASC file, and just select the ASC, the .asc file, and it just loads it up right there. So that should look very familiar. What's really cool about Chameleon is it lets you load several. So let's just go ahead and download this view over to town, for example. You can download several of these sort of color palettes and just quickly switch between them. And it's really great when you're creating stuff to be able to just do that visually. So once I have another one, I'll just select that one as well. And you can see here now I have two of these color themes selected. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this sort of second color to the word 3D Extruder. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to apply a fill effect. It works best when the color is applied through a filter. So I'm just going to type fill here and just literally grab the fill effect and put it on there. It defaults to the color red. It's really easy. First of all, let's just unroll here the effects, and you can see here's the fill, and you just select the color. First you have to hit play on the color theme, so that what it does is it creates if you hit play here, there we go, it created a new layer called color theme. So that's the first thing you need to do, is hit this little play button to create the color theme. And as you can see, it just downloads the colors into these color pickers. And then what you need to do is select the value that you want to fill, and in this case I want this sort of second color, so I just hit the number 2. And as you can see now, it quickly tied the color to the thing. But there's one important thing that you need to be aware of, and here is that linked to this theme of this comp, what you want to do is hit refresh comp list and select comp 1. And the reason you want to do that is because the difference between these two is this: when you select the actual name of the comp, which we should actually go ahead and change the name of the comp now. So I'm just going to go into composition settings. I'm going to call this main setup. Okay? Now that I've changed the name, I'm going to go ahead and refresh the comp list again, and this hopefully will make more sense now. So here I have the actual name of the comp, and then I have this thing called this comp. This comp creates a soft link, if you will, relative, if that means anything to you. And this makes an absolute link to this comp. And the reason we want to do the absolute link is because we're going to be pre-composing this text, and so it needs to know which comp to look into for the color theme. So the color theme is going to be in the main setup comp. So anyway, so we have the main setup here, and let's just do this again. I'm just going to go ahead and hit the number 2 again. And let's just change the color so you can see here, like that's 5, but we're going to leave it on gray. The reason I just showed you this to make sure that you've actually applied the color again with this new main setup as the link to the theme. All right, so once you have the 3D extruder, make sure again that you have the main setup, because otherwise when you do this next step, you're going to get an error. So I'm going to go now and switch over to 3D extruder, and 3D extruder has this really sort of powerful back-end stuff that does tons of customization options. But we're going to make this fun, quick, and easy, right? So we're just going to choose one of these presets here. So if you can see, what I did in the animation is I used this preset that has a bevel that kind of protrudes a little bit further and is a different color. And those presets are actually 2 presets. They are called fill and stroke. So the way to use those is first you actually have to create a fill and a stroke. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this one. And the first one I'm going to name F for fill, and then the second one I'm going to call S for stroke. And while I want the fill to be like this lighter bluish color, and then I'm going to make the outside, this is actually black, but I've color corrected it to have a little bit of a bluish purplish vibe. So the fill is going to stay with that color. I'm going to come back to my chameleon here. And I'm going to use this darker color for the outside stroke. So if I go to the stroke, I'm going to go to the type tool, back to the type tool, and literally swap this out to be a stroke. And if we go ahead and just preview the alpha of this, you can see what I'm doing here. Let's probably select the text, then go ahead and switch it. And so this is, the fill is now empty, and the stroke will get a 5-pixel stroke. Oh, the reason this is an issue is because, my bad, we were actually looking at both of these. So if I now turn off the fill, you're going to see that we can see just the stroke. So here's the fill, and then again the stroke on top. So what we're going to do is assign, so if we twirl down for this, into the fill color. Now for this color, we're going to assign the darker one, which is number 1. So I'm just going to hit the number 1. As you can see now, the outside has got the darker black, and the inside's got the gray. Awesome. So I hope you guys are following this really very basic, simple stuff. I'm doing a lot of explaining, but it's really quite quick and fast to do this. So once you have it, you go back into 3D extruder, and so for the fill, you choose the preset that's called fill, and just basically leave everything to its default settings and just hit extrude. And bam, now we have you can see the bevel, and it's all 3D, and it's all really cool. And we just have to do the same thing for the stroke. So select the stroke now, select the stroke preset, and then hit extrude. Again, remember, if you are going to use the chameleon trick, do not forget to link it to the main setup comp. If you leave it on this comp, when you run 3D extruder, you're going to get an error because it can't find the chameleon link. So anyway, as you can see here now, it really feels 3D. It looks pretty sweet. This sort of like brighter area is because it has by default a bright reflection card, which if you can see from the animation, does a nice little sort of effect when the camera's panning across, the reflection actually pans across, and it's going to be the same reflection for the top and bottom. So as you can see here, as it comes across, and it does it. It's not for some reason. It just moves very quickly across. But there you got to see it. So that's the reflection card, which if you want to animate and move around, you can do so here in the reflected object layer, which is clearly labeled for you. But what we're going to do is we're just going to keep things as simple as possible. So we're just going to leave everything at its default, and I'm going to parent the stroke to the fill. So I'm just going to grab the parent twirly and link it over here to the fill. So now whatever animation I do to the fill is going to happen to the stroke as well. And then if you really want to go an extra step, you can use the Zorro tool, which is I find a very useful tool for managing large compositions. And you just select the two main I guess layers, and you can see they're the only ones that are actually turned on. And I'm just going to give them a new tag called main text, and go ahead and open this up, and then just say add selection tag. And then I also want to do the controller here. So this here, if you see, this has all of these little like options. We're going to leave it. We're not really going to mess with these guys, but if you wanted to, you could then take both controllers and give it a controller tag if you wanted to. And then we can just say everything but the so like all of these that are not the sort of like the main ones. So I'm just going to select all of these. As you can see, all the ones that are like not turned on, we're just going to call these secondary. So just create a label that says secondary. And what I can do now with Zorro is just grab secondary and say I can basically make him shy in the timeline. Sorry. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit minus, and it just hides them real quick from view. And that's really kind of a quick demo of Zorro, but it's really powerful Zorro. So it didn't delete the layers, it just kind of got rid of them in the main view. So then if I just work quickly, if I wanted to get the controllers back, I would just go to controller and hit plus, and it brings me just the controllers. You see that? So when you have tons and tons and tons of layers, that really becomes a really handy feature. So now to hide the controller, just hit the minus, and then there you go, the controllers are gone. All right, so now that we have our 3D extruder 3D text, and if I go ahead and add a camera, you can sort of appreciate that it's a, I always like to use a 50mm camera, by the way. It's a really nice lens, I think. So if I go here to my camera control, one thing I like to do when I'm working with 3D extruders, two things. One is if you bring the controller back, the controller has something called edit mode, and if you click on that checkbox, and I'm going to do it for both of these layers, it basically just reduces it. It reduces your 3D extruder to just one simple, more workable layer. So as you can see here, now I can actually rotate this thing in real time and really see it in 3D how it really is. Once I uncheck the box, it will bring back the actual 3D object, as you can see there. Let's just go ahead and choose edit mode, the top one, to make it basically work the fastest. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to have the text bounce in, right? For that, we're going to use iExpressions. So iExpressions is, again, really simple to use. We're going to go into the library here, and in the library we're going to go into physics simulations. And what's really cool about all of the iExpressions is that each one has its own definition. And here we're going to choose something called throw 3D. Because it's actually a 3D world, the physics simulation was actually going to be computed in 3D space, which is really powerful. But again, you're going to see how simple it is to do. So I'm just going to grab select throw 3D. Here you see the instructions on how to use it. But I'm just going to hit OK. I'm just going to show you guys how quick and easy it is to actually do it. So really it's simplified down to two main settings. Here, if you twirl these down, you have some more advanced options. But right now we're just going to really care about this. And what I'm going to try and do is to sort of determine what I want the ground to be. So if I go back to my arrow tool and I move this sort of here in Z, I can see that, by the way, what I just did there is I held down the Option key or the Alt on Windows, and you can actually move it as a wireframe as well, which is also going to make things a little bit faster to work with. Okay, so once I say this is pretty good for the ground floor, I think actually maybe a little bit, because don't forget we're going to put that reflection in there. So if I hit P here and reveal it, I can see did you notice how I was moving it in Y, right? So this is the Y. So Y is really where we're looking at for the floor. So let's go ahead and just make it an even 450 to make things easy to follow. So that's essentially going to be the floor. So you just really literally put that Y value in here. So I'm just going to say the floor value is going to be 450. And the default bounce is really bouncy. Because this is pseudo, we're going to have like a lot of weight. We're going to make it less bouncy. We're just going to make this 30%. So that's how much bounce we want. And what you just do is you literally select the layer, and you hit apply. Now don't forget to link these two together first, right? Because otherwise when you add the expression to the fill, the stroke is going to stay behind. So you just want to make sure those two move together. So what we'll do now is just preview this real quick. Here's another script for you. So this is throttle and purge, and this one allows you to quickly turn your multi-processing on or off, and it also allows you to change your bit depth. So I'm going to just go ahead and, I have a lot of RAM in this machine, so multi-processing works really nicely. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn that on and hit preview. Okay, so nothing seems to happen, right? It just stayed still, and you're like, that's weird. That's because it actually is sitting on the ground floor now. So all you need to do, and when you deal with physics simulations, they work like they are in the real world. So if this was like a real piece of text on a real floor, the way I would move it and make it bounce is literally lift it. So here at frame 0, I'm just going to go ahead and again, I'm going to hold down the Alt key so I can see the wireframe. And I'm going to move it here off camera for the first frame. And now I'm going to go ahead and preview this again. And now you'll actually see the physics simulation, which you can see there. And you can see that it's got a nice heavy thud feel to it, right? It's just like a little bit of bounce, which is really nice. So man, you have no idea how complicated it would have been to have written an expression to do that. And here it is, all just one click away. And again, if we move our camera around, you can see that it's all in 3D space. So that's set now, and moving quickly along, let's set the new text, which is iExpressions. So I just type a new text tool, iExpressions, and I want it to be in the same font size, so I'm just going to leave everything the same. So here it just did the what do you call it, the outlines first. So I'm just going to, by eye, line it up here as close as I can. Let me just zoom in here. So I'm just going to, as you can see here, that's sort of the top of this stroke touching the other stroke. Because it's actually in 3D space, I might need to make a little bit of an adjustment once I see it in 3D, but for now this is good. So this is going to be, and I'm going to duplicate this. So this is going to be the S for stroke, and then this one is going to be the fill. So let me do a fill, and again I'm going to put the fill effect on both of them. So I'm just going to put that one on there and put this one on here. So for the fill, I want to go ahead and go back to the text tool and again hit this little button to swap the fill. So now the fill is the fill. If I turn that off, you can see then just the stroke. And again, we're going to, if you right click on color here, you can say reveal in timeline, which I'm going to do here. And for this one, going back to my chameleon, I'm going to choose the little bit lighter one, which is going to be the second color, or sorry, the number 3 color here. So again, I'm just going to hit number 3, making sure the main setup is set up. And then for the stroke, I'm going to do the same black dark color, which is number 1. So again, I'm going to make sure that it has a fill effect, and I'm going to reveal it in the timeline, select it here in the timeline, and hit number 1. And notice how I clicked that twice because it didn't take for some reason the first time. So if it doesn't take the first time, just click it again. So here we go. Now it's linked to the dark color. Just so you can appreciate, well, let me just finish here real quick. So I'm going to just do the exact same thing I did for the 3D extruder. I'm going to extrude the fill using 3D extruder here. And I'm going to switch to the fill preset and hit extrude. So again, make sure the fill is the fill. And then, oops, what just happened here? Yeah, sorry, it's the camera's a little bit off. That's why it suddenly feels like it's not aligned. So now I'm going to go do the same with the stroke. So I'm going to grab the stroke and choose the stroke preset and hit it extrude. So there it's doing its magic. And you can see now the stroke and the fill actually line up, which is great. All right, so again, I'm going to now go back to Zorro and just sort of tag these things together. So once you've created tags, you don't have to create them again. So just select the 2 main ones here, and I'm just going to choose the main text And I'm going to go to the add tab, add tab first. I'm going to add this tag, so just select the main text. So add selection, it added to 2 layers, and then I'm going to do the controllers. I'm going to say those are controller, add those tags, and then these, all of these are the secondaries. So again, I'm going to say this is secondary, add, and oh, and there's one other thing here, the camera and the color theme. I'm going to move these to the top. I'm going to call these, I don't know, comp items. So I'm going to call these comp items. And we'll put lights and stuff in this tag. So comp items. So go ahead and add that. And so now we can just, again, go into select, hide all of the secondary items. So and now notice how quickly it just simplified that comp for me again, and we can just very nicely see the just the things that I'm working with. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to parent the stroke to the fill, and once I do that, make sure you do that first. Once you do that, then you can start sort of lining things up to make sure that they feel they feel like it's sitting on top of the expression. I think I did a pretty good job. Don't forget that 3D Extruder is in edit mode, which is why it looks a little bit weird. So I'm just going to go back, reveal the controllers, and then just turn off the edit mode for both the stroke and the fill, so we can actually just see the whole thing and make sure it feels right. So there, it does feel pretty good. Go ahead and hide the controllers again. And I'm going to you can also hold down the Alt key, by the way, when you move the camera around. But anyway, you can see here that the P is not lined. It's actually encroaching a little bit on the E. So again, the parent is the fill. So I'm just going to grab the fill, and I'm just going to hold down Shift key and hit the left arrow to move it over 10 pixels. And then maybe another 10 pixels, so that it's just sitting there nicely. And I think I need to actually, if you look here, it looks like it's encroaching a little bit there, so I'm just going to go up like 5 pixels. Or sorry, a couple of pixels. That looks pretty good there. All right. So now, I think you've probably figured out how we're going to make iExpressions bounce on top of 3D Extruder. Well, we're just going to go ahead and look at the position again and see the floor, which is 334. So if we go to iExpressions, we just change the ground height to be this new number, which is 334. And leave the bounce the same. Just have that fill selected. Make sure you parent it up and hit apply. And I hope you appreciate how quickly this thing is going. We've already now. So if I go ahead and preview this, you'll see that it's, well, actually no, because remember the last thing you need to do at the beginning is move the actual layer up to above the comp. So I'm just going to go ahead and hold on the Option key, Alt key, and move it up. And if I go ahead and preview this, so you can see there's a bit of a problem. They're both kind of falling together. So how do I delay iExpressions to fall a little bit later? It's very simple. I just basically go decide where I want it to start. So I'm going to let 3D Extruder come in and bounce and sort of settle a little bit. And then to like around frame 15 here, I'm going to say that's when I want iExpressions to start falling down. So if I just go to the iExpressions, which is the last thing I did, so I don't have to load it up again. But let's say I had done some other things. You can always load up the iExpression by selecting the layer and hitting load. Sorry, the property that it's put on, which in this case is position, and hit load. So that loads it up. And if you open up Simulation Start, you basically want it to start at, and we're going to choose a frame number, and we actually just want it to start at frame number 15. So just type 15 there. Select the layer again or the position and then hit apply. And so now you'll see that the iExpressions is gone because it hasn't started to fall yet. So now when we preview this, so you can see now 3D Extruder falls and then iExpression starts falling at frame 15, and then it falls and it bounces on top of the 3D Extruder because we determined that that was the floor for that one. So again, we just finished doing really something that would be much harder and complicated, and just I hope you can see such really easy, quickly push button steps, and again with a really great level of control. So now that we have these two guys, we just have to have the quick, fast, and easy come and fall forward. So this one, we're going to repeat the same steps again, but for this, because it moved like a new sticker, we're just gonna type the word quick for now. So I'm just gonna go ahead and solo this for now, just for a second, so that we can just focus on this. And I'm gonna again do all the same steps, add the fill effect, and duplicate it. And this one's gonna be the stroke, and I'm gonna go back and make that a stroke. And make it 5 pixels, yep. And then this one's gonna be the fill, and the fill. And so for this one, the stroke's gonna be the same dark color, so I'm just gonna go ahead and select this in the timeline. So select the color, and so that one's gonna be number 1. And then for the fill, reveal in Finder or timeline, then I'm going to select, for that one, I'm going to make this number 5, right? This nice brighter color. So that, these are not the exact colors, by the way, that I used here, but you get the idea of having these be sort of like more muted colors and this be the nice, bright, punchy color. What's really great, to be honest, is I forgot which chameleon palette I used for that one, so I just loaded up a couple of new ones here, which I think are both going to be working really nicely. So all of the same steps again here. We're just going to go ahead and select the fill. We're going to go to 3D Extruder, select the fill preset and extrude, and just give it a minute. And then we're going to select the stroke, select the stroke preset, and hit extrude. And so voila, we can go ahead and add all of the Zorro tags as well. So I'm going to go to add, I'm going to just select main here, main text, and I'm going to go ahead and apply that selection tag. This one is going to be the controller, add tag, and then these are going to be the secondaries, secondary. And one other thing I haven't done is we can add a tag. So notice how you can add several tags to each layer. So for quick, so I'm going to grab the stroke here and add it to the fill, or sorry, parent it to the fill, and I'm just going to select both of the main, just to make sure that I can't remember, I had them both selected, so I think that was already there. Anyway, so I can also add a new tag called quick, so that I can select this independently. So I'm going to go ahead and add quick to those two, and then for iExpressions, I'm going to do iExpressions, and I'm going to add that to those two. And for 3D Extruder, I'm just going to add a tag called 3DX and add that selection tag. What's really cool about this is notice how I had originally soloed the layer by hand here. I'm going to go ahead and unsolo these guys. And now I can use Zorro in the select mode to solo certain things. So for example, if I just wanted to work on quick here, I just select quick here and then choose solo, comp solo, and hit isolate. And you can see that it's going to give me just that layer. If I wanted to switch that to be, for example, iExpression, then I switch to iExpression and hit isolate. It's going to now turn off the quick layer and turn on just the iExpressions layer. And then if I wanted to have them both on at the same time, I could go to quick, and then instead of hitting isolate, I'll hit plus, right? So it added it to the selection. So I hope you guys can appreciate how cool and powerful Zorro can be in these sort of setups. So for now, I'm going to isolate quick, so I'm just working with quick. And then quick is going to fall on the same floor as 3D Extruder did, right? Because that's supposed to be the ground floor. So if you don't remember what that floor was, you can just go ahead and hit the original layer, and again, for position, which is where the bouncing expression, iExpression, gets applied. And just go to iExpression and hit load. So you'll see that it was set to 334 before, but now it loaded it up at 450, which is where the 3D Extruder is, which is the same ground. And we're going to apply it to the fill of quick. So now it has, so now that moved down because it was sitting above the actual floor, so through the physics it just fell to the floor. But what we're going to do differently for quick is we're actually going to take advantage of the fact that this is actually 3D. So if I turn on, if I go to Zorro here and I turn on I'm going to turn on the iExpression, so I'm going to hit plus so that I can see both of those. You're going to see here that quick is going to appear to, well, it's occupying the same space where 3D Extruder is. What we want to do is, we'll say here around frame 25, we're going to take the quick, and again, I'm going to hold down the Alt key to move this with a wireframe. I'm going to move it up here. Hello. Aha. So notice that it's not moving, and the reason it's not moving is because I already applied the iExpression. Once you apply the iExpression, the expression takes over the position of the layer, right? So according to the expression, it's really on the floor because we dropped it on the floor. So because I want to actually move it, I'm going to go ahead and undo that move that I just did that appeared to not be doing anything. And if I hit P again and I twirl down, you can see that because the text is red and this little button is depressed, that means that there's an expression enabled. As you can see here, it's the iExpression called Throw 3D. I'm just going to turn that off temporarily so that there's no expression. Now I can move this. See, now I can actually move it. And the reason for this is I'm going to set a couple of keyframes. I'm going to have it also start up here. But instead of just having it start there, I'm going to set a keyframe for it there at frame 25. And then just like 1, 2 frames forward. Again, remember in physics, you are actually throwing the object. So I'm just going to throw it down a little bit, but then I'm going to select Z here. Notice how my pointer turns to the letter Z. When it's on the letter Z, I'm going to move it so that it comes forward. See that? So now and you can see from this motion path that I just basically gave it a little bit of a throw diagonally down and forward. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want the quick to actually fall in front of the other two text layers. So if we go ahead and turn on the iExpression again by just clicking the enable expression, and we're going to go ahead and minus iExpression so I only see the quick, and I'm going to just bring the work area here so we can just preview this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this. So you can see here it actually is bouncing super forward. So that's like we really threw it really hard. So what I want to do is just literally I'm going to take a look. I'm going to turn off the expression again and just take a look at how much I moved it forward. So I went from 0. So if you notice here Z, I went from 0 to minus 184, and you can see that was a tremendous toss, so it really flew out of screen. So we want to do a more gentle toss. So instead of actually doing it here in the comp, we're just going to do it numerically so it's easier to control. So if we're going, if throwing it forward means Z goes into a negative value, instead of such a huge value, we'll just do like, let's try minus 30. So as you can see here, I just made a more gentle throw, and I'm probably also going to just bring it up in Y a little bit so that it's just more of a little light toss, right? And so if we go ahead and preview this, so here now you can feel how it's more of a gentle, but you can really appreciate that it's bouncing forward. I think we can probably bounce it just a little bit further than that. So instead of minus 30, I'm going to go ahead and minus 40 on that second keyframe. So notice I took the time marker and I lined it on that second keyframe and I just went minus 40. So if we preview this, so now it actually comes forward. Let's preview it a little bit longer to see where it actually settles. So again, I hope you appreciate the power of this. This is a real 3D simulation of what a real a real object bouncing forward would feel like. So, and because of the friction and everything, it even comes to a stop in a very realistic manner. If you want to adjust those things, if you twirl down the physics tab, you have things like how much gravity there is, what the gravity direction is, and then here's this one here is called friction on ground, which is how much friction is going to be presented by the ground once it like starts dragging on the ground. I'm just leaving all of this stuff to default. You can play with it what you want, but I just want to show it to you so you can see and appreciate how easy it is to modify those things. So even though iExpressions are really easy to use on the surface, they're also really powerful underneath the hood if you choose to go there, but you absolutely do not have to go there. Okay, so now that I have all of my physics simulation, I have all my 3D, I basically almost have a finished animation. what we're gonna do now is do some little tweaky things. So what I did in this animation is when the items hit the ground, there's a sound effect, but then there's also a camera shake, and the RGB channels get a little bit moved. So just notice how the red here comes through, and that's because I was sort of simulating a camera shake where even the RGB tubes get malaligned a little bit. And for that, we're also going to use iExpressions. But before we go there, let's just preview what we have so far. So you can go into the layer tagger and say all reset here, and then reset, and that just brings everything back to the way it was before. And notice how it still kept the way what was a turned on layer and what wasn't a turned on layer. And then we can just go here to main text and then isolate both in the timeline and in the comp, so that all we see is the three things. We probably don't need to isolate it in the comp, just in the timeline here. So let's go ahead and preview this from the beginning. So here you see 1, 2, and 3, and the quick slides forward and comes to a stop. Very cool, and you can see that the quick is on the same layer as the 3D extruder. So what I did in my animation is I just had it, I had the camera kind of rotating around it, so you can do that by either animating the camera. So I'm going to bring that back. I'm just going to bring my comp items and I'm going to add them. So if I see here's the camera and the color theme, we can just go to bring these to the top. And the camera, again, you can either animate the camera with the camera tool, or a nice, really easy trick on animating the camera is creating a new 3D null, and we're going to call this cam null. And when you create things, again, I hope you appreciate that you don't need to use Zorro for this. Zorro just something that makes your life a little bit easier, which is what we try to do with all of our tools. But I'm going to just go ahead and select the cam, and I'm going to add the same comp items tag to it here, to that one. And then I'm also going to do these two, and I'm going to create a new tag called cam and add that, just so that I have quick access to that if I need. So once you've created the 3D null, you just parent that camera to the null, make sure that it's 3D again, and then you can just rotate this null on the y-axis. So if I rotate it this way, let's see here, just get myself oriented. Yeah, so that's a minus 70. So let's say we start at, like, say, plus 50. Alright, and that's a good place to start, and we're going to go ahead and set a keyframe there at the beginning. Notice that I'm at the end of the timeline here, so I can actually appreciate the whole environment, and then we'll do minus 50 to finish. And notice that now the quick seems to be a little bit off, so what I could do again is, because I'm actually throwing this, if I modify the second keyframe, I'm just going to double click on it. If I see the difference between the first X, so the first X was at 362, and the second X is at 362 as well, right? So I'm not actually moving in our X, so I'm just going to change this to, say, 380. I'm not really sure if I need to go positive or negative. Oh, that seemed to be right. So notice how now it's a little bit further up, and I just could keep doing that. Let's go say 390. And if I wanted to, I could also give it a little bit of a 3D rotation. So if I have my Y rotation start at 0, right? And then I'm going to move that keyframe to line up at the beginning of the toss, and then at the end of the toss, I'm just going to have it, say, be 20 degrees. Again, I'm not sure if I'm rotating that. No, that's the wrong direction. So we'll say like minus 10 degrees, just so that the quick and easy is kind of looking at us a little bit. Although I'm trying to decide if I like that or not. I think it's better if we just get to see it with a little bit of an angle. It kind of shows off the 3D extrusion kind of nicely. But what I probably do want to do is have it come a little bit closer. So I'm going to go from minus 40 to minus 50, just so that there's a little bit more of that 3D feel. And then if I want it to be closer or further away, you can do that in the camera itself. So if I just go into my camera tool and I select the track Z, I can go ahead and move in a little bit here on Z. And so this is going to be my finishing spot, right? So I'm going to go ahead and reveal both the position and the point of interest, and I'm going to make that a keyframe here at the end. And then at the beginning, I'm going to actually not go to the beginning because I want to see where 3D Extruder lands. So for this, I'm actually going to start a little bit further away. So I'm just going to zoom back a little bit. And a little bit further back. Just so that there's this sort of feel of not just the dolly around, but that we're actually pushing in a little bit. So I'm just holding down the Option key and zooming back just to make the response a little bit faster. Again, I could just turn on those edit modes. So if I turn on my controllers and then bring those in here, I can go ahead and turn on edit mode for both the stroke and the fill, so that when when I do my camera, sorry, I was holding on the Option key, but I'm going to undo this so you can see that it's a lot more responsive. Oh, the other two layers are there, so let's go ahead and solo just 3D Extruder, which is at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and isolate that in the comp as well, and just in the comp I'm going to hit isolate so that it's going to turn off everything else. And so now that I have this selected, I can then really in real time move my 3D layer around. So if you just do a couple little quick switches, you can move your whole comp in real time. So anyway, this is a good place for the camera. So as you can see, it just set keyframes for position, so I don't actually need to worry about the point of interest. I'm going to turn that off and move this to the beginning. And I'm going to make this be, you can't see this, but I'm right clicking and I'm going down to where it says Keyframe Assistant. So I'm going to do that up here. No, you have to do it here. Okay, so you're just selecting Keyframe Assistant, and I'm choosing Easy Ease Out, which is going to give me this. And I'm going to go to the N one, and I'm going to choose Easy Ease In. And I'm going to do the same for the camera null. Easy Ease Out. And for the last one, Easy Ease In. So I'm easing into a stop. And I'm going to go ahead and select both the Y rotation and the position and go into the graph editor and literally graph both of these and just pull this out so that it just comes, sorry, I just want to do the position. I want it to come to a stop. So I want it to kind of spin around fast first. So it's going to go to fast, sort of swing around a little bit fast, and then it's going to slow down to a stop. If I want to do the same for the rotation, I can. That's what I was trying to do originally, but I can just grab the rotation here and just pull out the ease out so that it eases into a stop as well. So now that I have those two, also because in this solo mode, previewing is going to be ridiculously faster, and all of the bouncing, all the physics is going to be there because remember that's a real-time iExpression, so that's really fast. So here you can preview the camera move, and you can see that nice dynamic move at the beginning where I was spinning it around, right? So man, so we're doing really well, and I hope you appreciate how fast and easy all this stuff is. So let's take a break here and actually save our project. I'll be right back. Alright, so I just saved it, and I'm going to go ahead and import a sound effect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrub, and what I'm going to do is bring up the rest of the controller. So I'm going to move my camera up to the camera null here. And the camera null, so that they're together. I'm going to bring, first in the comp, I'm going to bring in all the main text. I'm just going to hit plus so I can see all the main text. And for each controller, I'm going to also bring the controllers. So controller. So for each controller, so 3DX I've already made. 3DX controller. So iExpression controller, I am going to also go ahead and go into edit mode for both the stroke and the fill. And I actually forgot to tag the quick ones with the controller, so I'm just going to do a quick, I'm going to hold down the caps lock key so nothing tries to redraw. I'm going to hit an all reset here, and I'm going to quickly tag the quick controllers as controller. So I'm going to go to add and say controller, add selection tag, and then for all of the secondary stuff, which was all of this. So this and this, and then stuff is up here. It got moved. When I moved the camera, it all got moved around. So these are the secondaries. I can move the color theme up as well. So here's the stroke secondaries, and these are the 3 secondaries for these. So I'll go ahead and do secondary and add that tag. Okay, now I can go back to the selection and say, bring me all my main text, isolate, and also in the timeline, isolate, and also my controllers, and add the controller. Okay, and then we can also, for the quick, make it edit mode for both the stroke and the fill. So now, hopefully, this all is gonna move very quickly. So if we, as you can see now, as I move around, it all previews very quickly. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a RAM preview of the whole thing, so that I can scrub through it and put my sound effects at the right places. So if you can see here, very nice. So the first 3D extruder falls right there. So I'm just gonna make bring a comp marker here just to mark it for now, and then when I just keep scrolling forward here, you can see the second bounce is right there. So I'm gonna bring that second marker there, and then go forward, and that seems to be the iExpression's first hit. And then the second one, if I go forward, there's the second one. So I'm just going to bring in this second marker. And then finally for quick, if I go forward and back it up a little bit, and that's exactly the point. Bring this comp marker in. And then the second bounce for quick is there. And so the second bounce is kind of like, it's a bounce and then it slides. So make sure you mark the actual point where it hits the ground. So that's it. So I have 2 bounces for each one. And what I'm going to do now is bring in the boom sound effect and literally just put it, I'm just going to put it at the top here. The reason you don't see it is because, oh, there it is. I didn't add it. So if I hit LL, I can see here that the sound effect starts right at the beginning. So all I have to do is literally line it up with the marker. But what I'm going to do is for the second hit, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. If you hit LL, you get the waveform, and then if you hold down the Shift key and hit L, you get the volume control as well. So for the second hit, I'm going to bring the volume down to, say, -10. Or let's do -7. Just so that there's an appreciably less intense hit the second time. And so now that I have these sort of two set up like that, I can duplicate them both. And I'm going to just drag them to the top. And just literally drag them back to line up with the third. And here I just have to adjust this one to hit this one. And I'm going to do this as well. And then drag it to the top. And then drag them up. So this is the most manual thing you're going to do in the whole animation. But once you do this, you have these really cool sound effects that really add to the animation. And sound design is really important. I think that is something that you really should never overlook. So there we go. So for the final animation, I did a little bit more sound design. I added several layers of the boom sound effects with different kinds of stuff. But for the intensive purposes of this demo, I just wanted to show you how you want to line up your sound effects. So once you have them lined up, we're going to go ahead and pre-comp them. Well, you don't really necessarily need to pre-comp them, but I guess I'm just an organized freak. We could just use Zorro here to just add an SFX tag. So we'll go ahead and add that. And what we're going to do is choose a keyframe assistant here under animation here, keyframe assistant, and say convert audio to keyframes. And what this does is it creates a new layer called audio amplitude. And if you roll this down, you can see under effects there's this left channel, both right channel, both channels. So we're just going to work with both channels. If you go into the graph editor, sorry, you have to twirl it down, you can see that it basically is giving us data to match where each one of those booms are. So if we go back, you can see here, for example, here's where the first boom hits. So if we go back to here, you can see that it booms just 2 frames later. So that's actually interesting to note. So what we really probably wanted to have done is have the to be 2 frames before, right? So that's actually an interesting tip. So you want this to be, so I just added a marker there. So you want this to be the actual place where it hits. I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you guys. I'm not going to do it for here. But that's something interesting I just discovered. Anyway, so what we're going to want to do is we want to have the camera shake every time the boom hits here at sort of peak, which as you can see here, the peak is about 42.93, although it gets louder here at the end. So this one's about 48. So we'll say, anything above 40 here, it's going to be the boom that we're going to want to shake the camera. And the way we're going to shake the camera is we're going to use an iExpression. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this down. Since we don't need to see the sound effects, I'm going to go back into the select mode and choose the sound effects and hit minus to remove them. We just have to remove them from the timeline. So just the timeline, and I hit minus. So there, they're just out of view, which is great. And we can twirl back the audio amplitude. To be honest, we could actually add that to the sound effects here, the audio amplitude, and then just hide that as well, because we don't need to see that. So sound effects minus, so that just got rid of that. All right, fantastic. So we're going back into iExpressions and into the library, and we're going to go into just a basic wiggle. Really, we're just going to wiggle the camera. So just choose basic wiggle and hit OK. And the wiggle is best applied to the null, the camera null. So we need to get the camera. So I'm going to go back into Zorro and just choose camera here, cam, and you guessed it, we're going to hit the plus so we can see it. So the camera null is where we're going to apply the wiggle, and wiggles are always applied to position. So in this particular case, we're going to apply it to the position. So in iExpression, just take the basic wiggle, and you can either select position yourself, or iExpression is actually smart and will assume that you want to put it on position if you don't select position. But we're going to go ahead and select position just to be explicit. And I'm going to say leave the frequency and amplitude to the default for now and hit apply. And as you can see, you already saw it moving. What's going to happen now is there's going to be a wiggle on the whole thing the whole time. So if we go ahead and preview this, it's basically just going to be like shaking the camera the whole time. So just probably very violently because the default settings are kind of aggressive. So what we want to do is kind of do more of a high frequency, lower amplitude wiggle, right? Because it's sort of more like this violent shake. So the way we're going to do that is first we're going to not select position. We're going to select the actual layer itself and hit on the little link button. And the reason you want to make sure that you don't have position linked is because what it will do is it'll actually create a link to that property. What we want to do is I wanted to create new sliders for these links. So if I just have the layer selected and I hit the link button, it's going to tell me that I didn't have a property selected and asks me if I want to create a new controller, to which I'm going to say yes. Okay, so now on the cam null, I'm going to see a new effect now. So if I go under effects, you can see here it says frequency of basic wiggle. Awesome. And we're going to do the same thing again. So I'm going to select just the cam null, and I'm going to hit link for the amplitude. I'm going to hit yes again, and now you can see it created another slider for me to link up to the amplitude of the basic wiggle. Why do we want to do that? Well, because we want it to only wiggle when the big boom hits, and we could manually keyframe that, but we can use yet another iExpression to help us do it just at the time when the volume is high. So if we go back into the library and under linking, we're going to choose a linear link 1D. The difference between the 1D, 2D, and 3D depends on how many values the property has. So here you can see the position has 3 values. That would make it a 3-dimensional value, and that would be, we would use 3D. But what we are actually going to link to are these amplitude and frequency sliders, which as you can see are just 1 value. So that's going to be linear link 1D. So we just select that and hit OK. And once it's loaded, this is probably the most amount of options we've seen all day, right? And this is actually kind of really, I would say, something fairly advanced. So what we want to do is we want to link the amplitude and frequency to the volume of the boom. So if we go back and bring the sound effect back, sound effects, so we're going to bring that back. And remember we were just working with the right channel. So if we twirl down and see the slider here, what we're going to do is we're going to link from this both channel slider to both of these. So the simple as selecting the slider that you want to link to, which is the both channel slider. And then again, now in this case, I do want to have the slider selected, and I'm going to hit the link button. And you can see here it just says quickly that linked to the slider of both channels. And once that's linked, we can go ahead and close this. And we're going to want to determine these settings, if you will. So remember when I quickly came over here and we went in here, we determined that the values that we wanted to shake from were sort of 40 and above, right? So the minimum value that we wanted to actually trigger is going to be 40. So whenever the minimum value of this is 40, which is great. So basically when it goes past 40, and then what do we want to be the limit? So we're going to go here to see what the highest value is. In this case, it's 48.2. So we'll just go ahead and say 48. And it can actually be slightly below, because all it's saying is that when the volume is between 40 and 48, do something. So those are the slider values, minimum and maximum, where we want it to operate. And then what we want the value minimum and maximum, that's going to apply to what we want the actual amplitude and frequency to be. So then we go here to, first we'll do the frequency. So when it first hits, right, when it's at its maximum, say 48, we want it to shake really quickly. So we'll make the value, so the maximum value here is going to be 10, right? So we know that's a high frequency wiggle. And then when it's 40 or below, we want it to be nothing. So we're gonna leave that at 0. So it's gonna basically remap the value of the volume from 40 to 48 to be something frequency understands, which is 0 to 10. And it's as simple as that. And so then now, while I have the slider of the frequency here, or you could actually just select the frequency here, you just hit apply, and you can see that turned red, which means the iExpression was just applied. And we can tell that it's at 10 because the volume here is at its peak at 48. But if we go to, back here, if we go to a lower volume, like say back over here, right? So here it's only 20, then the frequency is 0, because that's below what we wanted the shake area to be. And so we're just going to do the same, but for the actual wiggle, instead of a value of 10, we want it to wiggle, say, the amplitude we want it to be, say, 15. So I'm going to now select the amplitude, and instead of 10, we're going to do 15, but we're going to leave the slider linking and the slider minimum and maximum the same, because that's going to be the same. The same trigger of audio is going to drive the amplitude, but with slightly different values. So once you do that, we go ahead and select the amplitude here and hit apply. And you can see that also just turned red now. And if we go back to a part where the audio is very loud, you're going to see here that the amplitude and frequency now are mapped to these new maximum values of 10 and 15. So again, this would be really complicated to do with normal expressions, but as you can see with iExpressions, it's really just as simple as clicking a couple of buttons and setting a couple of sliders. And if we wanted to add one last bonus, which is I'm going to do a new adjustment layer here, and we're going to call this the separate RGB, separate Oh, something's not spelled right here. Separate. Oh, this one. That looks right. Okay. So for separate RGB, I'm going to choose the plugin called Separate RGB, which is under here under, let's just search for it. So I'm going to look for separate. Ooh, I don't have it installed. All right. Pause. I'm going to install this and be right back. Okay, and so we're back. Sorry about that. I had installed the CS4 version of the plugin. So there is separate RGB, and I'm going to apply it to this adjustment layer. And what separate RGB does is it literally separates the channels. So if I slide here the red offset, you can see there what's happening. So what I'm going to do now is link the same audio amplitude to that offset value. And the way I'm going to do it is if I go to iExpressions. So notice when I came back, my old expression wasn't loaded anymore. So if I ever want to load an iExpression that I've already sort of set the values that the way I like in the case of this amplitude, I just select the slider property first and just hit the load button. And see here, it just loaded up the linear link 1D iExpression. So I'm going to do that now for, if I go ahead and reveal in timeline here, I'm going to choose the red offset. Now there's going to be, you're going to see that when I try to apply this here, I'm just going to leave the default values. I'm going to try and hit apply. It says that it cannot be applied because it can only be applied to 1D properties. Remember, I was explaining that before. As you can see here, red offset is actually a 2D property. So just remember these values that we had entered before for the slider minimum and maximum, so our 40 and 48. And I'm going to go into the library and grab the the linear link. Now in this case, I'm going to choose the 2D property and then hit OK. And you can see it basically looks exactly the same, except for here now the values, you have 2 values instead of just 1 value. So the first thing I need to do is go ahead and link it to the audio. So I'm going to go to the both channels here, just go to the slider and link it. So you can see now it's linked to the audio. Remember, we were going to set the minimum and maximum to be 40 and 48. And then what I'm going to want for the red offset is when it's normal, which essentially the value, like the neutral value, is 640 by 360. So that's going to, instead of 0, I'm going to be 640 by 360. And then now when I wanted to sort of like the maximum movement value is going to be here. So I wanted to say shift 10 pixels in X. So I'm going to make it 650. And if I wanted to be diagonal, I could make it go, say, 365, right? So essentially when at the peak of the boom, I wanted to offset it to, and let's just try those values here so you can see. So 650 by 365. So it's going to look like this at its hit. That's probably a little bit too much, so I'm glad I tried it. So let's just do 645 by 365. That's a little bit more subtle. Actually, probably 362. Yeah, all right, that's a little bit more realistic. So I'm glad I tried that. So now I just literally enter these values here in the max. So 645 by 362. And I'm going to basically apply those to be in the red offset. So if I just, well, let me set this back to it's normal. You don't have to do this, but just keeps it simpler for you in case you ever have to turn off the iExpression. So then you just select the red offset and hit apply. So that's as simple. Now let's say, for example, I wanted to have the green channel offset a little bit. Let's say this one goes in the other direction. So instead of 645, it could be 635. So that, see, there's a little bit of a more thing. That would be cool. So maybe that was too much. Let's do 638. That feels better. So again, I'm just going to reset this to 640. And now the values for this are going to be 638. We'll just say 637. And then we'll leave the Y, instead of going up, we'll make it go down. So it'll be 358, right? So that'll make it go 2 pixels down instead of up. And then what I'm going to do is, here in the timeline, select the green offset and then hit apply. So now it's going to apply that So you can see it apply the iExpression now to the green offset as well. So I hope you can appreciate how quickly now you can start linking all kinds of values around in your comp, all to this automatically detected audio. So I didn't have to go and keyframe each one of those hits. It just automatically detected the hit from this audio amplitude layer and then applied the appropriate amount of movement. So that's the linear link iExpression. So now we're going to go ahead and preview this, and keep in mind I'm still in the quick edit mode, so you can see how quickly the renders happen, so that you can work very interactively, if you will. So now we're going to see. Okay, so we have a problem here. So you can see that the camera seems to be wiggling all the time, although the little offset seemed to work at only the time. So what's going on? So let's go into the camera null. Let's go to the position, which is when we applied the initial wiggle. So let's go ahead and load that to see if we can see what's going on. So as you can see, the frequency and amplitude link button is unlinked. For some reason, this is not linked. So in this case, we actually want to link it to the frequency and amplitude. So if we just select the frequency and then go here and just link it to that frequency slider, right? Just give it a second. And now it's linked to the slider of frequency, and we're going to do the same. I'm just going to select the amplitude, and I'm going to link the amplitude. Now, what I've done is I've created the link here, but what I need to do is, now that it's linked, I need to apply it back to the position. So I'm just going to select the position again and hit apply. For some reason, the order that I did things in, it must have gotten disconnected. But I'm glad that this happened, so that in case this happens to you, you can see how quickly and easy it is to sort of hook it back up. And the way I was able to tell was then again by just hitting position and hitting load. And when I hit load, now you can see that it's actually linked to the sliders, but before it wasn't. So if we go ahead and preview this now, you're going to see that the camera shake is only going to happen when the boom happens, if you will. All right, so let's take a look. And as you can see, it seems to happen like 2 frames too late, because remember I told you that the actual the hit happens 2 frames afterwards. So if you really wanted to fix that, by the way, let's just do that. Let's just go ahead and show you how quickly it is to fix that. So I'm going to go for each one of these. I know that it's 2 frames in, so I'm just going 2 frames. And I'm going to grab all of them and just slide that back 2 frames. 1, 2, right? So now I've basically moved that 2 frames back. I could technically just slide this audio amplitude layer and just go back 2 frames as well, because it's just sound effects that actually work. So I'm just going to go 1, 2. So I just went back 2 frames, and because everything is done, so if we take a look here at the both channels, so as you can see here now, the hits actually hit when they're supposed to hit. So see here, and that's good. So now, because it's all live dynamically linked, we should just be able to preview it again, and it should work just right. So don't forget, the iExpressions are real expressions in After Effects. So everything that you can do with an expression in After Effects applies in the case of the iExpression. So there you go. So now you can see the little bit of the camera shake, and also the little bit of the RGB separation that happens when the camera hits. And the last steps that are left to do, or the last big step really, is the reflection. Everything else I'm going to leave for you as a homework, the color correction and the vignetting and all the little sweetening that I did there at the end. But well, first what I want to do is go turn off edit mode. So I'm going to just grab each one of these controllers and turn off edit mode, and notice how there's a little bit of a lag. That's because it tries to start rendering that the whole 3D structure. So if you just hit the caps lock key before you do that, you can do this much quicker. So as you can see here, it doesn't actually try to render when I'm going through this. So once I have these all selected, I'm going to go into Zorro, and also going to go into select and go all reset to reset everything back to normal. So now that everything's there, I'm going to create a new comp, and I'm going to call this main final. And this comp is all the same size, all same frame rate and everything. I'm going to take the main setup and I'm going to drag it in here. Turn off the caps lock key so I can see what's going on. I'm going to go towards the end so I can see the finished layout, if you will. Actually, that's not towards the end. Let's go back here. Once that quick stops bouncing. Okay. So here's really cool. So I'm going to, oh, by the way, the reason you see this white outline is because we actually have to create, oh, you know what? It's the separate RGB, it's the separate RGB, I believe it's the separate RGB that's giving us. Let's just turn this off for now. We're going to come back and address that in a second. So let's go back to the main final. And just duplicate the layer. And make sure that the audio is only turned on in one. You don't want it to be double. And I'm going to go ahead and hit scale. And I'm going to turn off the locked values. And I'm going to do -100 on the Y. So if you come down here, oops, that's the top one, and we move the bottom one back, you can see that it doesn't look right, does it? Because it literally is doing sort of like a 2D inverted flip. But if you hit on the collapse transformation button, which is this button here, you're gonna see something interesting. One is everything's shifted. You're like, whoa, what happened? And then the second is the reflections actually look like real 3D reflections. That's because it when you hit this button, it says this world is the new 3D world. And because there's no camera in this 3D world, it's just you going through a default camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this camera rig over. So I'm going to grab the camera null, and I'm going to grab the camera, select both of these. I'm going to go ahead and copy. And I'm going to just turn, well, you don't even need to turn them off. You can just leave them there. And then hit paste here. And if you hit here, you can see the layer name. So now you can see quickly, now everything looks back to normal, because now it's actually utilizing these cameras that I have in this comp. So now we can grab the reflection, which is the bottom layer, and move it up. Oops. If I turn off here my OpenGL, that's the reason my shortcut key wasn't working before. Now I can, there we go, now I can hold on the option key. So as you can see, that was a little bit too much. So let's bring this up. And now it's too much. But as you can see, it's a real true 3D reflection. In other words, look, I can see the bottom of the U and the bottom of the I. This is a really great aspect of the 3D extruder, that because it actually utilizes real 3D layers in the real 3D environment for After Effects, the reflection, like this little reflection trick, works like a charm. It's really great. So I'm just gonna scooch this up until, so the Q is gonna protrude the bottom a little bit because it's actually not on the same layer, but it moves so quickly that you're not gonna notice. As a matter of fact, I just realized I forgot to do the new sticker. So we're gonna get to that last. Alright, so now that I have it there, you can either leave it like this and then bring down the opacity, say to 50% or whatever. But I'm actually going to put a little blur. If you notice that when you lower the opacity, it kind of like, you can kind of see through the trickery of it. One way to fix that is to just apply an effect. So I'm going to apply a box blur. And I'm just going to do a, notice that when you apply the box blur, it filled in everything again. So I'm just going to put a 1 pixel blur and maybe a 2 pixel blur, and we can bring down the opacity to say 30%, and that's looking like a pretty sweet reflection. And again, when you animate it, as you saw from the final thing, when the camera turns everything, all the reflection is going to be in real 3D space, which is really fantastic. So the last thing that's left to do is to have this quick animate as a ticker. So let's just preview this in its full 3D glory. Sweet. So what we want to do is, once the quick hits and slides, which is really like right around there. So see frame 43. We'll say frame 45 there. Let's say frame 44. Frame 44. So at frame 44 is when we want it to start sort of going into this little news ticker thing. So if we go back into our main setup and you go into, first we're going to do it for the fill, and we're going to have to do it both for the fill and the stroke because again they're two different little structures. But you just grab the quick and you just literally go into the pre-comp, and if you keep going into the pre-comp, any of these will work to where we get to where it says base layer. By the way, the reason it's soloed is because it was soloed when I created it. But anyway, if you go into the base layer, you're going to see just a simple text layer. So what's really cool is that you can, well, first we can change the text of this to be something else completely. Let's say, for example, we wanted this to say fast. If you just literally change the type here and you go back out to the why isn't this oops, fast, there we go. So if I go back out to the final, you're gonna see that because this is all live After Effects comps with real 3D layers, well, as you can see, the stroke didn't update, but you can see how the fast is all 3D extruded and stuff. So that's basically the little trick we're going to use. So I'm going to go ahead and undo this. And at frame 44 is when I want the new sticker to start. So I'm going to go ahead and split the layer here. So I'm just going to do under Edit Split Layer. So it creates a secondary layer. And it's on this secondary layer, I'm just going to turn off the solos. Now we're going to use the last iExpression. So if I go into my library and you go into Source Text, Text Animation, New Sticker. So I'm going to hit OK. The way the new sticker works is it will take text that's on several lines and scroll that text across, putting this, whatever characters are in here, as a separator between them. So keep in mind I'm editing the top one, and I'm going to just go ahead and do a second line. I'm going to say fast, and then a third line end, and then a fourth line fun. And so even though I can't see it, if I move it, you can see that that all is there, right? So I'm just going to hit undo to make sure that the alignment is the same, so that notice that the quick stays in the same place. Once I have that, I can select the quick, fast, and fun. And the separator I'm going to use is just going to be a space. So I'm just going to remove these, delete that, and just type the space in there. The speed actually, if you look at the help here, it tells you that the speed is in pixels per minute, which is a pretty slow speed if you think about it. So we're going to try a pretty high value here, say 100. And then the length is how many characters are displayed at once. So we're going to leave this at 0 at first real quick so you can understand how it works. So with my layer selected, I'm going to go ahead and say apply. So it quickly just put everything on one line, but if we scrub here, you're going to see that it doesn't move as kind of like you expected. Like in the final animation, you just saw the word quick when it landed. Oh, that's not it. So once it lands here, you notice that you only really see these many characters at once. So if you count the space there, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 characters at once, which is coincidentally how many characters are in quick. So if that's what the length is, so I'm just going to go ahead and the length be 5, which is the 5 characters in quick, and hit apply again. So here now you can see it just trimmed it to 5 characters. So now when I come over here and I scrub, you can see that it starts moving. I need to make this comp a little bit longer, so instead of 60, well, for now it's actually still moving kind of slow, so let's actually really up this speed to 300 and hit apply. By the way, if you don't want to keep hitting apply, once you have something selected, you can hit this little button and it's basically like live updater. So 300 feels pretty good, but let's say I wanted to type now 500. You can see it just automatically updated it. So actually, let's try it at 500. So if we preview here, you're going to see that I'm just going to RAM preview it. So you can see that that's going pretty fast, but you get the idea of it. And so when we come back out to the main comp, it's just going to it's just going to be automatically updated. There's nothing really more to do. That all happens automatically, except for now I have to do the same thing on the stroke. Remember I said I was going to have to do that. So if you go to the stroke and you dig in, so one quick easy way to do it, so if I just go all the way into the stroke, so I'm just going to, again, any of these layers, you just want to get to the base layer. So one way I could do it is just go to the frame 44 and then go to the other one here. This is the F base layer, and literally copy this, but there's going to be two little changes I'm going to have to make. One is I'm going to copy and paste it at, well, first I'm going to split this at frame 44, so I'm split layer here, and I'm going to now paste this one on top. But notice how the color and the stroke is different. So for this bottom one, actually, no, it's probably better to just better practice anyway. I'm just going to delete the cheat. This is so simple and easy. You just grab it, and because I already have the values here, I'm just going to select apply. Oh, the main thing I forgot to do is you have to type in the rest of the text. So I'm just going to do quick, easy, and fun. That's the main thing. I knew there was something. Anyway, so now once you have this and you've applied the expression, the iExpression, then it just goes along and it will do it at the exact same pace. So if I go back to the final, you should see hopefully the stroke moving together with the fill. And it's not. Look at that. So what's going on here? Oh, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. So it's quick, fast, and easy. So let's go back to quick here. So it's quick, fast, and easy. So as you can see, it is quick, fast, and easy unless you make a little silly pilot error. So hopefully now it's lined up. Now that I typed the same text into both. There we go. Now it's quick, fast, and easy. So, yeah, so the animation, all the 3D, everything happens. You can add 3D lights, and the lights are going to actually correctly add shadows to everything in your scene. So if you open the sample project, you're going to see all the light setups and all the color correction that I did. So we can just basically review the final project again. And of course I timed the music to kick in at the time of the bounce, right? So that's it. I hope you guys really enjoyed this tutorial. And oh, one last thing I want to show you. The Chameleon. One of the advantages, we're going to go ahead and load the ASC file. So we'll go ahead and load the view over town, which I think is a difference. Well, we'll just load both. Right, so it's the second one is the one that's linked. But if we go here into the setup comp, and you in this comp, which if you refresh the comp list, you want to hopefully see, now you're going to see all the comps, but we want to put it into the main setup comp, right, which is where we're located. I wanted to just show you how quickly it is to try a completely different color scheme. So you just literally hit the little apply button and it will update all the colors. See, so the number color 1 was the black, right? So it actually just reversed everything like this. If I wanted to, obviously it doesn't work with the orange on the outside, but you can also hit this little shuffle button. So it just shuffles the colors around. But keeping in mind, oh, that's interesting that it hit that one at the same time. There you go. So here you can see, but what's really cool about it is it keeps the design color swatch together. So like this actually is a pretty cool little color, a completely different approach to it, but this looks pretty interesting. And that's one of the cool things of actually setting things up with Chameleon, is that you can set everything up and then play with your color schemes, and everything updates sort of like automatically that way. If I wanted to just go back to my original, since I have it loaded, I can just hit play there, and it should bring me back to where I started. And then the last thing I just wanted to show you is that, and this is where the separate RGB needs a background. So right now there's just, if you look at the alpha, it's just a straight alpha thing here. But I'm gonna go ahead and add a solid in the back. So I'm just gonna put this in the back. And you can put a little ramp here. And so if I go here and just choose ramp, I'm going to choose radial ramp. You can choose colors from the let's choose this in the center. So you can choose colors from the chameleon color theme, even if they're in another comp. So here I'm going to select, so I'm going to reveal this in the timeline and just move this up. So I want to show you one little feature of chameleon. You don't have to use these colors specifically because all of these I think would be too bright for the foreground. So what you can do is, see here, you can bring the brightness down. So I'm going to just bring the brightness to be like, say, -60 there, in that range. And I'm going to do the start color to be, say, this gray here in the center. So I'm just going to choose number 3. Again, remember I have main setup selected. And then for the end color, I'm going to choose the black color, which was number 1. And because I had, so I can leave the brightness at 0 for number 1 here, for the edge one. So you can see here it's a little bit darker. You could like, let's say for example I wanted to choose this yellow, but a really darker version of the yellow. So I could go really dark and go 5, and it's just to give you an example. So it's just linked to that actual hue of yellow, but it darkened it to -70, or added a -70 darkening to it. So this is really powerful. I think it would probably look better the other way around. So I'm going to choose that for the start color. So choose that for 5. And then for the end color, I will choose 2. So now it'll give it this gradient, so it feels like there's a light source back there. And again, you can play with all this stuff however you want, but I just want to show you how you can play around with the brightness in the linking. So when I go ahead and put in a new swatch, the same darkening will happen to the new colors in the new swatch. Okay, that's really it. I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial that utilizes all of these awesome tools that make your life a lot easier, so you can just focus on the creativity that you are working on and not the technical details, which can be kind of a little bit of a chore sometimes. Okay, that's it. Ciao.